coming back for part 2 of listening to hear me speak on concerning our bodies and the body of Christ. I'm going to spend the majority of this second part today actually reading from the Gospel of Mark I've chosen, which chapters 15 to 16, not all of it, because I think we need to kind of read what it says about Christ's body when we think about the incarnation, and therefore how we relate to each other and how we relate to ourselves. And of course, for so many of us, we're going to know this gospel really, really well. But actually, I think when we have a different focus and considering what you've heard today, it might be really helpful to read it with a new lens. So I'm going to start at Mark chapter 15, verses 33. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling for Elijah." And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly this man was God's son." There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them was Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James the younger. They used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee, and there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Salome, brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed, for you are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised, he is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. I wonder what you think is going on here. Apart from something incredibly human, incredibly divine, incredibly queer, here we are faced with the body of Christ, Jesus, fully divine and fully human, dead, really truly dead, and yet really truly resurrected, really truly alive. Life and death, human and divine, flesh and blood are completely ruptured. As Christians, we understand this to be part of God's love that crosses over all boundaries and breaks down all divisions. It's at the core of Christianity, and my God, is it queer. When I was first exploring my queerness and my Christian faith as something that I felt was completely intertwined with each other, I have to say I found the incarnation so difficult to comprehend I wanted to walk away from the doctrine entirely. But for some reason I kept returning, it kept mattering, it kept filling up my body and asking for more. I suppose I felt a little bit like Mary Magdalene in the garden, wandering around in the dawn light, asking what on earth was going on. What I had learnt as a child that was something mystical and something separate that I couldn't really understand suddenly came alive when I encountered it as a queer person, a person with a body that other people weren't sure of, other people didn't like. Because the incarnation throws into question everything that we think we know about the world, everything that we think we understand about ourselves and what it means to be the other. Patrick Cheng, in his 2011 book Radical Love, talks about the incarnation as something that dissolves the dualism between matter and spirit. Suddenly, the mutually exclusive categories don't matter anymore because God is with us, existing in us, dwelling apart from us in all that we believe and do. It's the most unexpected thing. A God who breaks out of an assigned role and breaks open the binary division to sit with us. It's so confusing, but it makes so much sense. It throws what it means to be human into question, and it sets us up for the Christian path, what I understand to be the queer journey. As I've already mentioned, the incarnation completely disrupts boundaries. It goes against all constructs of order or social norm or what should happen when or where. Jesus appears in a way that is wild and chaotic, that twists and it turns. Something looks stable, and then it falls sobbing to the ground. It ricochets off everything, throwing our heads and our hearts into turmoil because it doesn't make sense. And yet it absolutely does. It's messy. It's slippery. It's about bodies again. As queer people, it is possible to gaze upon what we've just read, the incarnation, and of course the resurrection, not as rigid doctrines, but as sources of liberation and of hope. Because if you think about yourself as a queer person, it expresses what it means to be queer, as existing in a liminal space, living with the dynamic tension with all of those around us. It says no to a hierarchy of bodies. It says no to the structures and the systems that are binary, that have harsh, firm boundaries that cut and bruise us. With Christ, we are being invited to stitch a new garment that works to understand our inherent divinity. That's the incarnation. That's the gospel message. And for me, that's what it means to queer our binaries, queer our boundaries. That's what it means to be queer. Thank you for joining with me today. God bless.